Do you have an embroidery machine, but you haven't ventured into making your own designs yet? Or maybe you're thinking about getting one and you'd like to see the design process. In today's video, I'm going to show you from start to finish how to make a design in Embrilliance software. Now, part of this design is going to be an applique feature similar to what you see on my shirt. And so I'm also going to show you, just in case you're interested, how you can use Embrilliance software to make a cut file for the letters. That way, if you don't want to trim it by hand, you can use your Cricut, your Caesar Romeo, or if you're like me, your laser to cut out the fabric. In my next video, I'm going to use what you see here, and we're going to stitch it out. Here's the Embrilliance software, and today I'm going to use a 4x4 friendly hoop to design this. For today's project, I'm making a mug rug, and this mug rug is going to say Cozy Season. So the first thing that I want to do is I want to go ahead and make a square. I'm going to go right up here to where it says Create Designs, and you do have to have Stitch Artist to have this tool. We'll click on it, and then here's the one that makes squares and rectangles. So I'll click on it, and then I just go down here and I drag my cursor. I can fix the size later. To fix the size, I could either drag it from the corners, if I want to keep the proportions the same, or I could drag it from the side, or the top or the bottom. But to me, an easier way is to go right up here to the Select tool, click on it, and then I can fix my dimensions right here. Now I'm going to click over this, and I'm going to use 3.93. I'll hit the return button, and because it was locked, it changed this proportionally. Let's go ahead and unlock it so I can fix that bottom measurement. Once again, I'm going to type 3.93 and hit the return button. Notice that my hoop says it'll take up to 3 15/16, and that's what it's showing here. Now, I always like to have this in the center of the hoop. I like to have my design in the center of the hoop. So with it still selected, I'll go up to Utility and say Center in Hoop. That looks good. Now we have to assign some stitches to this. Now this is going to be my placement or my position stitch. So in this design, I'm going to start out with just my stabilizer in the hoop. Then this will stitch out, and that'll show me where to put my background fabric. So for this, I just need a run stitch. With it selected, we're going to go right back up here to Create Designs, and we're going to click right here on the run stitch. Let's come over here so we can see the settings on this run stitch. So I'll click on it, and it's a single stitch. That just means it's going to go around once, and the length is 2.5 millimeters. For my position stitch as well as my tack down stitch, that's what I'm going to use. Now that we have our position stitch, now I want to add a tack down stitch. I want the tack down stitch to be right on top of this. And so with it still selected, I'm going to hit Command C for copy and then Command V for paste. Now you can't see that there's two squares here, but there really are. So if I grab this and drag it off, you see the first one behind it. Let me just go up to Edit and Undo. Now that undid my stitches. So once again, I'm going to do Command C for copy, Command V for paste. And there it is. Because it copied from this first run stitch, I still have a single run at 2.5 millimeters in length, or each stitch is 2.5 millimeters in length. With both of these being the same color, unless I put a stop in there, the machine's just going to go right from the first one to the second one. I want to make sure that my machine stops so that I have time to put my background fabric on there. So to assure that there's a stop there, I can click on this one. Let me click off of it. Okay, let's click back on it. And then we're going to go down here to color and we'll change the color. I'll click on the color. And then right over here, I'm going to click on this left side that says color. And then I'm just going to pick something else. And I want it to be something that'll stand out very different than the other color. Let's just try this. We'll say OK. If we want to see how this stitches out so far, you go right up here to the Stitch Simulator tool, you click on it, And then you can either play it, or I prefer just to drag it. So here is my position stitch, or my placement stitch. It's showing me where to put my background fabric. The machine stops. I place my fabric on top, and then I run my tack down stitch. Now it's time to work on the words. I'm going to add 2 words to this, and we're going to do them very differently. For my first word, which is going to be the word cozy, I'm going to use a font on my machine. To do that, you go right back up here to Create Designs. When I click on it, I have some options over here. I can bring in an image, a vector, or I can type using system fonts. We're going to click on that, and then this box pops up. I do want to use the font impact on this, but if you want a different font, you can just click right here and select something else. Like I said, I'm going to stick with impact. Now down here, I'm just going to put my cursor over the text that they have, and in all caps, I'm going to type the word cozy, and then I'll say OK. The first thing that jumps out to me is those 2 are touching, and I don't want that. So let's click on the Y, and I'm going to use the right arrow on my keyboard to move it over just a little bit. It is very likely that I'm going to have to adjust these letters later, so I'm not going to get too concerned about it right now. Now before I put any stitches on this, I like to go ahead and get the dimensions where I like them. So I'm going to click over here. It selects the word cozy, and I'm just going to drag this until I think it's the right size. If I wanted to, I could change the dimensions like I did earlier. But for this, I just want to look at it. I think that looks pretty good, but I do want to get this back in the center of the hoop. So I'll go up here to Utility and say Center in Hoop. Now I want to make cozy into an applique design. With that, I'm going to have a placement or position stitch. That's going to show me where to put my applique fabric. After that, I lay the fabric down. Then I run what's called a tack down or a material stitch. And then if I didn't have a machine cut that fabric out, I'll trim away the excess fabric, and then it's time to do my outside border stitch. With Embrilliance, you can have all that just done automatically for you. So with Cozy selected, I'm going to go right up here. This is the symbol for applique, and I'm going to click on it. Now that is not the border that I want, and so to change it, I can click right here on applique, and I can change the border stitch to a satin stitch. If I'm making an applique on a shirt, I like to increase the size of this, but this is a small project, so we're going to stay with a stitch width of 3 millimeters. But because of the 3 millimeter border stitch, I need to move these apart some more. So I'm going to click on my Y, use my right arrow. Then I'm going to go up to the select tool right here, click on it. That way I can select the C and the O, use my left arrow. I'll click off of it, I'll click back on the C, and I'll move it left a little bit more with the arrows on my keyboard. Now I am just always wanting this to be in the center, so I'm going to click on Cozy over here and go up and say Utility and Center in Hoop. Now one of the things that jumps out is there is really no gap in here or over here. We're going to fix that. Now that's going to take playing with editing points, and some people don't like this. They can be overwhelming and intimidating at first, but if you play with them for a while, you're going to learn to love them. Let me go ahead and click off of this. We're going to click back on the O, and I accidentally moved it just a little bit, so let me go Edit, Undo. Okay, we'll click on the O. You don't see the editing points yet. To get them to show up, you click right up here on Create Designs. And there they are. What I want to do is I want to select these edit points on the right side of my O and move them over to the right. And then I want to select these edit points on the left and then move those to the left. And that's going to open up a space there. There's a couple ways you can select your points. One way is you can just drag your cursor around the ones that you want to select. Now I let up on the cursor, and as long as I actually did select them, they turned blue. And now I'm going to use the right arrow on my keyboard to move those to the right. Now I want to move these points on the left. The other way that you can select your edit points is click on one, hold the command button down, click on the next one you want, the next one you want, and then this is the last one that I want, so I'll click on it, and then I'm going to go ahead and let go of command. Now on my keyboard, I'll hit the left arrow, and it moves those over to the left, and I think that's a perfect gap. Now let's work with this C. Let me move it over so we have it more in the center. We're going to do pretty much the same thing with it. We might be able to get away with just moving one side though. Let's see. So we're going to click on the C. Those points showed up. So I'd like to leave this as wide as it is. And so I'm going to select all these points on the right side, move them to the right and see if that opens it up enough. I'll just use my cursor and drag a line around those. And I think I have them all. The ones I selected turned blue, and that's exactly what I wanted. So we're going to move those to the right. And actually, I think that's a big enough gap. But if you look, let me zoom in. If you look down here, this is no longer in the center. Now, it's not a big deal. It doesn't look bad. But I am me, and I'm a little OCD. So I'm going to click on that. Now, I can't just hit the right arrow because look, then it skews it the other way. So I need to grab it with my cursor and just drag it to the center, or what looks to be the center, and that fixed it. Let's look up here. We have the same thing. I'll click on it and drag it to the right just a little bit. To get this back to the size of the hoop, I can click right here and then click on the H. Now let's go ahead and select Cozy. And I want to show you something because right now this would not stitch out the way I want it to. Let's click on the stitch simulator. We have the outside position stitch, the outside tack down stitch. Then I have a position stitch, but I have no tack down stitch. It goes straight to the border stitch. It does the C, then the O, then the Z, then the Y. And that's very inefficient. But the first thing that I want to do is I want to fix that by adding a tack down or material stitch. To get out of the stitch simulator, I can click right here. So if I click on my applique, it brings up some options here. Notice that material is not selected, and the default in my Embrilliance is to only put a position stitch. If I also want to have a material or a tack down stitch, I have to click right here. So we'll click that, and then let's look at that stitch simulator again. This time we have our position stitch, our tack down stitch for the outside. Then for the C, we have our position stitch, and then we have our tack down stitch. Now it's hard to tell the difference in them because if you see right here, those thread colors are very similar. But after that, we have the satin border stitch. All right, let's click out of that. And then we're going to use what's called color sort to fix the issue of having each letter done individually. To use the color sort feature, and that's an Embrilliance Essentials feature, you go up to Utility and Color Sort. When I click on this, it gives me the option of opening it in a new view. This is going to reduce the color changes by 9. And especially if you're using a single needle machine, that is huge. I like to open mine in a new view, and I'll show you what that looks like. We'll click New View. We are now in our new view, but I've reserved the old one in case I change my mind about something. Well, let's go back over to the new view. Now here's what the color sort did for us. We'll go back to the stitch simulator. And we see that outside position stitch, the outside tack down stitch. Then we see that every letter goes through the position stitch first. Then every letter goes through the tack down stitch. And then every letter goes through this satin border. So much more efficient. The second word that I want is the word season. And for this, I'm going to use an embroidery font that I have in Embrilliance. To do that, I'm going to click right up here on the letter A. That brings up just ABC. That's the default. I'm going to change my font to, it's called Fuchsia. The one I want is Fuchsia. And I want the 1-inch one. So I'll click on that. You can see that the design changed. Now I'm going to go ahead and back up over ABC. And in all lowercase, I'm going to type the word season. Then I'll hit return. Okay, that's pretty cute. Let's move it down here. It's going to be generally in this area. Notice though, those letters don't touch. I don't like the way it looks now. So if I click on season, you see a green square for each letter. We're going to start with the E. We're going to click on this green square. Now I have some options. If I click on this up arrow and I move E to the left, each of these letters is going to move and that gap is going to fill in. If I don't want the gap to fill in, I click on the lower triangle and every letter moves, but the gap doesn't get filled in. If I only want to move the E, I click right in the center. And that's what that would be like. Let's go back. Okay, we're going to click on season. I'm going to click on the green square of the E. And then I'm going to use this top triangle. You click down on your mouse and then just move that to the left. Notice all those gaps are filling in. Now that looks pretty good, except I think the S, the O, and the N need to be closer over there. So this time let's click on the S. We'll click on the square and we're going to use this down arrow and we'll move it left. And those letters don't close in. The gap doesn't get narrower. So if you use the top one, you're closing the gap of everything to the right of it. If you use the bottom one, you're still moving everything to the right of it, but you're not closing in the gaps. Now there's a couple things I don't like about this. I don't like this O, so I'm going to click on season again, click on the square of O, and I can just drag this up to make it not so large. The other thing is there's not much of a gap in the E, so I'm going to click on season again, click on the green square on the E, and now I'll just drag this to the right. And that opened it up just a little bit. I think I'm going to make that O smaller yet. So I'll click on that green square. Let's drag this down a little bit. And then let's make the N a little taller. And I think I'm pretty happy with the relative size of each letter. I just want to make the entire word larger. So we'll click on it again. And I'm just going to drag it from the corner. That might be a little too large. Let's make it just a little bit smaller. Now with the right arrow on my keyboard, I'm just going to move this over to where I like it. And I think that looks pretty good. Do I want to move it up some? All right, let's click off of this. Now I want Cozy Season to be more in the middle. So the whole thing needs to go up. I don't think I want it quite in the middle, because I feel like Cozy should somewhat be in the middle. But what I need to do is pick everything from Cozy, hold the command button down and add season to it. So I'm going to have to click right here to show all those things. I'm going to click on the position stitch, hold the command down, add the material stitch, add the satin border, and then add the word season. For now, I'm going to say utility and center in hoop. Okay, I think that's too high. Like I said, I think Cozy should be closer to the center, but not really in the center. This is all just personal preference. And I think I'm going to stop right there. I think that looks good. We're almost done with the design, but I do need one more stitch around the outside. What will happen after all of this is stitched out, you'll put another piece of background fabric on top of this, pretty side down, and then you're going to stitch around the outside. There's a couple ways to do this. You could leave a gap so that when you take it out of the hoop, you turn your fabric and the piece that was on the top goes to the back, but then you have a hole to fill in. So I like to make my mug rugs using an envelope closure. What that is two pieces of fabric. They overlap, but there is a gap so that you can still turn your fabric. You're going to understand much more about that in the next video when I stitch this out. For now, I just need to add another run stitch so that I can connect the back fabric to what we have so far. When I do that, I like my last stitch to be slightly inside of these run stitches. Because what I was finding before I did that is, when I would flip my material, sometimes you could see a little bit of this stitch, and I don't like that. To create that last run stitch, I'm going to go right up here to Create Designs. We'll click on it, and now I can make another square. Now I want to go ahead and zoom out so I can see more of the screen. So we're going to click on that, and then I'm just going to drag my cursor to make a square or a rectangle. We'll fix the size after I get it in there. I want that to be a run stitch, so I'll click right here. Now let's go over to run stitch because this time I want it to go around twice. So I'll change it to double. And then I want the size to be smaller. I want it to be 2.0 millimeters. Also, I like the corners of this last stitch to be rounded. So I can click right here on Shapes and I can bump this up. You can put it wherever you want. You know, it could be that rounded, but I like to use 6. Yeah, I think that's just a nice smooth corner. The last thing, it is still selected. Let's go Utility and Center and Hoop. Okay, what is this right here? How did I get this line in there? Let's just delete it. I'm not sure how I did that. Now before I save this, I want to go back up here to the Stitch Simulator and see how it stitches out. So we'll click on it. We see we have that outside placement line, then the outside tack down, then we have the placement and the tack down and the satin border stitch. We have the word season, and then we have that last run stitch. Let me back this up. Notice when I'm doing the Stitch Simulator that the word season is just going right over the word cozy. Well, there is a feature called hidden stitches, and I have mine turned on. You can do that by going to Embrilliance, Settings, down here to Jumps and Overlaps, and I have these two marked, so when I save this in my actual stitch file, there's going to be some stitches removed. If you want to look at that in your working file, there is a preview button for that. Click on the Create Designs twice, and then click on these scissors. These scissors is truly just a preview. It would do this whether I click on that or not. But if I want to preview that in my Stitch Simulator, then immediately before doing the Stitch Simulator, I have to click on Remove Hidden Stitches. So let's look at it this time. There's where you see those stitches are removed. And the reason you want that is to keep a more smooth design. So where the red letters are going over the charcoal letters, they're not going to be humped up as much because some of those stitches of the satin border were removed. Now that it's time to save this, I'm going to go right up here to File, Save As, and I save it as a stitch file as well as a working file. The stitch file is what you need for your machine to read it. The working file is so that I could bring it back into Embrilliance and I could make some tweaks to it. So I'll say Save As, and I'm going to name this EMB for Embroidery, Mug Rug, Cozy Season, 4x4. My machine takes a DST file, that's why it's on that, but you have these other types of files as well. Now I'll say Save. Now remember in my intro, I also told you I was going to show you how to make a cut file in case you want to use a cutting machine or a laser to cut out your applique fabric. I'd like to go ahead and save my design. After I've saved my design, I start peeling everything else off. The only thing I'm going to leave is applique position stitch. And the reason I do it this way, because not everybody does it this way. I don't think I've seen anybody else do it this way. But when I don't have this isolated, I was getting some other weird things in my cut file. And so I tried this and it worked. To make your cut file, you would select what you want the cut file of. Go down here, click on this color. Now, instead of worrying about picking a color, we're going to click right over here to Applique. You want to make sure this is on Applique position. And then notice mine has an inflation rate right now of 1.5. We're going to click on that, and I'm going to change that to 1.0. Now, this next step is crucial, or it's not actually going to change it from 1.5 to 1.0. You need to hit your tab button. That has to turn blue. And then you can say Save As. For now, I'm just going to call it Cut File. So I'll say Save. We'll save it at the default DPI of 96. We'll say OK. I can click out of this, and then I can click out of this. Now, when I do that, it asks me if I want to save it. I don't want to save it. If I save it, I'm going to save over the good file that I just made a few minutes ago. So I'll say Don't Save. Let's go ahead and open that cut file and check it out, and that looks good. So thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you were watching this to learn something, I hope you learned something as well. Remember, in my next video, I'm going to stitch this out, and during the stitch out, I'll be able to further explain some of the things I talked about today. So thanks again for joining me, and I hope to see you in that next video.